Hey, this is David for BigBits. Finally got the stream up and running today. Hopefully everything works out well. I'm trying to keep an eye on the actual stream and see if it actually is working well. I can hear myself in my head there. Let me... Sure. Yep. Looks like everything's working so far. Just a moment. Alright, so it's been an adventure to get the streaming up here on TradingView, but it appears to be doing well right now. Yeah, there's a lot I had to do today for some reason. I had set up a stream originally. It didn't work for whatever reason. I recreated it, and this is what you're seeing now. It's actually working, so that's good. There's quite a few things I actually wanted to talk about and a couple things I wanted to do on the stream. So I'm actually going to be updating some of my popular indicators, and what we're going to be doing to update those is we're actually going to be utilizing the new else if feature in Pine. So we're going to be converting a bunch of our old functions that we had that had a bunch of nested else if statements. We're going to be converting those into actual else if statements instead of having to nest those within one another. So they should run a little bit better at that point. All right, so let me go ahead and take a look at the chart here. I'm not really going to do a lot of TA on the video. I've done some ideas here on TradingView recently, but just to kind of summarize what I'm thinking about TA on Bitcoin and also with the S&P is that I kind of think we're going to range for a little bit, and then price will probably drop down. We're looking at that potential golden cross on the S&P. But at the same time, I still think it's going to come back down to the 100, but we'll see about that. I'm going to pull up one of my other charts here, and this is the Cro USD chart. This is the crypto.com coin for those of you who may be unfamiliar. And it is actually going to be doing something interesting today. The CRO coin is doing its syndication today. Well, the CRO coin isn't doing that, but they are doing a syndication event for their exchange to where you can buy Bitcoin at 50% off its current price, but you have to stake these CRO coins. So a lot of these coins have been bought and held so that you can get more Bitcoin at 50% off. And they do these syndication events for other crypto as well, so this isn't like the first time they've done this, but at the same time, this has probably been one of the biggest ones because it is for Bitcoin. It is 50% off. But since it is today, I imagine there's probably going to be a bunch of people who pick it up, who have picked it up just to use it for the syndication. And then once the syndication is over, to dump it and sell it back so that they can get Bitcoin. So it kind of worked out really well if you had bought it for the purpose of buying more Bitcoin through their exchange, if the price does come back down, that is, which I kind of expected to. So let's go back to the daily chart. So essentially, if you would have bought CRO at any point in time in order to do the syndication event, you could have made a lot of profit right now for the most part, and it was scheduled for today, June 30th. So if you had bought it just at the beginning of June, you would still be up like 40-50%, something like that. And if you had bought it at any point during April, you're probably up over, well, not quite 2x, but you could be over 2x if you bought it in April. So it's pretty wild to think. But what's really interesting is the people who have bought it, and this is versus Bitcoin, during the same period of time. This has been going straight up pretty much since December. And this is absolutely ridiculous. I haven't even looked at it in a few days, but it is absolutely shot up. And if you only bought this for using it for the syndication and you didn't care about the Cro, you just wanted the Bitcoin cheaper, you would have bought Cro at some point, and then if you were to get your Bitcoin, you would not only make a 50% profit on your Bitcoin instantly, you would be making a huge profit on the CRO you bought just to use it for the syndication. So this is kind of wild, but at the same time, it's a little concerning because CRO is like top 10 market cap now, and I'm not really sure it deserves to be top 10 market cap. That's another reason I'm kind of worried about that dropping down. But I really wanted to talk about that while I was on the chart. Really, the only reason I'm on here is to work a little bit on these indicators. You can see this is what I was talking about working on. We have a bunch of nested if-else statements here, and we're going to be converting those into else-ifs. And I'm going to have to actually use my script version of this instead. Just a moment. I guess I should probably also try and monitor chat. I haven't pulled it up on YouTube or even on Twitch right now. I'm not even sure how to use Twitch. This is my first time streaming on Twitch, by the way. I don't even think there's anybody watching over there, so that's cool. Don't really care too much. Have a few people on YouTube, so that's good. Hey, Harsh, you're on here pretty often. It's nice to see you again. Nobody yet on TradingView talking, but that's completely fine. If you have any questions or anything, just let me know. One thing I did want to talk about on the stream was the digital currency hearing that occurred earlier today. And that was pretty interesting if you were able to watch it. I was watching it while I was doing some other things, but I managed to take some notes. It was really some interesting stuff. Now, all of those Senate committee hearings are all really political. It's really annoying. So it makes them really hard to watch sometimes. But there was a lot of good information that came out of it. And it basically, to summarize everything, it seems like they pretty much all agree that a central bank digital currency is coming to the United States. There were a couple of good points on why maybe that might not happen, but they pretty much all seem to agree that it's going to end up happening. What is this? All right. To the person in TradingView chat trying to get their attention, you might want to try and contact them on Twitter or directly through the messaging system here on TradingView. They have some profiles. You might be able to get in touch with them that way. I talk to them on Twitter quite a bit, so that might be a better option for you than trying to get on the stream. I'm not sure they're even going to be watching the stream here. All right, so just kind of combining some of this code around, we're going to have to shift it all to the left so everything lines up nicely. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take all this. Oh no, I didn't want to do it quite that much. That one's good. All right, so we can actually just use tab to kind of help with this. Got all of our else statements lined up now. Now we just need our logic indented. And this one actually has to go back. So let's save it and add it to the chart, make sure those changes work, and then we're actually going to go back down and do that to our other functions. All right, so kind of back to that hearing meeting. Like I said, they all kind of want or kind of expect a central bank digital currency at one point. I'm going to kind of go over some of the stuff they talked about. I took a lot of notes on this because it was really interesting to me. I personally believe they're going to have a CBDC for America within the next decade that they're going to be using. There's a lot of people pushing for it very quickly because of the stimulus payments with COVID and stuff, but I think it's kind of unrealistic to expect anything like that within the next couple of years. I'd be really shocked if anything like that were to actually happen. They are wanting to get it done quickly, however, just because of the other countries who are doing it already, particularly China. They're using other countries other than China as like a model. So, like Sweden was one of the examples that they used in the hearing committee meeting as to one of the other countries who are very far advanced in their progress on it. They didn't like talking about the progress that China had made because honestly, if you listen to China's reports, they have the most progress out there on their central bank digital currency. And they don't like that because a lot of the talk was threats to the dollar uh, being the reserve currency and things like that. So they were all very protective. They talked a lot of bad things about uh, Bitcoin and Ethereum. They seem completely out of touch. So I'll talk about a few of those things as well. But yeah, there was just a lot of stuff they're out of touch with, and of course the Senate committee hearings, they always make them super political in the sense that they turn them into political talking points, and they just try to connect the dots for whatever issue or whatever committee they're in to whatever current talking point there is. So like they use this to talk about the Black Lives Matters movement. They use this to talk about, politicizing the use of masks, things like that. It's just kind of funny to see them bring these sorts of things up when it really has nothing to do with a central bank digital currency, unless you're talking about with minorities having trouble being underbanked or unbanked. But there really wasn't much of a need to talk about like riots and social issues like that. Bitcoin gonna die? Ooh, we'll have to see about that one. I kind of doubt it, dude. As long as people are taking payments in Bitcoin, I don't see it dying anytime soon, and I'm accepting them. Pretty much the network's going to have to die. And that's even if they do come out with a CBDC. I mean, I don't. Why wouldn't I just use a stable coin right now if I wanted to use a CBDC? I use Bitcoin because it offers a potential increase in value. If you're going to keep or you're going to use a CBDC, it's even more of a temporary store for me, for my value, than Bitcoin or Ethereum. And I don't even like to have those being all that temporary. Oh, knowing dump. Yeah, I can see that. I'm looking for around here. I want to see it come back down to 8.5. And I'm sorry I misinterpreted you because I was just talking about how those senators really didn't really like Bitcoin or Ethereum or any blockchain really for that matter. I'm surprised they had, I forget the guy's name. It was the CEO, Charles Cascarilla. Cascarilla? I believe that's how it's pronounced. Anyway, he's CEO for Paxos. He was there talking about that, but they are regulated through the NYDF, DFS. I believe that's what it is. Anyway, they're regulated through New York, and they have to meet a bunch of regulations, so that's probably why they were there as opposed to anyone else. Crypto tone low. So you're on YouTube, and while you're there, you can check out my channel. I have a bunch of scripting tutorials for TradingView on making your own indicators, and it's designed for beginners, people who have no coding experience. So if you want, you can go check out that playlist. There should be on my channel page the list of all my playlists, and it's the TradingView Pine Script tutorials playlist. There's probably about 40 videos in there now, and it starts off with a simple series for beginners on how to make your own indicators. And really, pretty much this indicator is what we make in the series. It's similar to it, and even goes into making your own strategies and stuff on TradingView as well. And I should have known better than to try and talk while I was doing this code stuff, because it's a lot harder to concentrate than I thought. Okay, so that took way less time than I ever thought it would. To do all that stuff, I'll be publishing this update in just a moment, but all right, so I kind of wanted to focus on the digital currency hearing. I took a bunch of notes. I already mentioned that. I'll go ahead and bring those up, but just kind of walk through some of these. If you all have any questions, just let me know. I didn't watch the entire thing. I actually kind of quit watching it about an hour in because I had some other things came up. But let's see if I also can't pull up the hearing committee.
Reminders. Once you start speaking, there will be a slight delay before you are displayed on screen.
Turn him
Minimize
down.
the background noise. Please click the mute button until your turn to speak.
I hope that isn't too loud.
Questions
Probably needs to be even more quieter.
If there's a technology issue, we will move to the next senator until it's resolved.
So anyway, this was their hearing earlier today. And man, I probably do need to turn that down even more.
You should have a box on your screens labeled clock that shows how much time's remaining. We've had a little difficulty finding that box sometimes, and so at about 30 seconds remaining, I'll tap the gavel to remind senators and the witnesses that the time is expiring.
No, I think the volume was fine. I went back and listened to it. It's just really loud to me. So let me actually turn it up.
The committee will hear testimony on the digital transformation of money and payments. We will discuss how it has enabled more efficient technologies, ushered in new players and business models, and raised important questions about what the rules of the road should be and the federal government's appropriate role. Testifying will be the Honorable Chris Giancarlo, Senior Counsel at Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher, and the former Chairman of the U.S. Commodities Futures Trading Commission. Also, Mr. Charles Cascarilla, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Paxos, and Professor Nakita Q. Coutinho, Visiting Professor of Law at Duke University Law School.
I'm going to skip to some of the segments.
Welcome to our witnesses, and thank you for joining us today. The COVID-19 pandemic has...
So essentially, this dude, he's talking about the ease and availability of digital payments right now. He also talks about how with digital payments, you don't really need a bank account, so it makes it more available. He starts talking about cryptocurrency because people started managing their own cryptocurrency through their own wallets, like with Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I need to do one more thing here. Okay, so they started managing their own stuff. Then they started talking about stable coins, and I think a lot of this meeting had to do with stable coins. That's why they brought in the Paxos guy. And then they talked a lot about pretty much how using stable coins or central bank digital currency is going to be a lot like stable coins and how it's actually going to work. And then they took some shots at Bitcoin and Ethereum, of course. So he goes on to say the innovations are inevitable. The U.S. should be a leader. They need clear rules in place, though, so that they can protect businesses and consumers. They're just wanting to learn more about CBDCs and how other nationalities are doing it. What effects could it have? What role will banks play? So that was an interesting question to me. They're wanting to know what role these banks and intermediaries will play. So it's kind of like they're acknowledging that they're almost useless in that kind of model. although there is going to be a need for them because it is going to operate alongside of cash. So transactions will kind of have to still be settled manually in certain cases. So I don't know. I just thought that was funny because things are going to really change, particularly with the intermediaries, those who are processing transactions. Could you imagine uh, transaction fees on Visa and MasterCard going down incredibly because they're going to be using a national digital currency as opposed to doing all of the transaction work themselves? There's just a lot going on there. And then let's see, this next guy. Oh man, I don't like this next guy. Him. He's hard to listen to. And not just because I don't like the way his voice sounds, and I'm sure people feel the same way about me. But he is the one who made this really political. I assume he was a Democrat just because of the talking points that he had. Nothing really against him, against Democrats, that is. But I just don't like that they make these things so political when they're there to talk about a certain issue. But anyway, he talked a lot about coronavirus and all the things related to it, and didn't really talk about a lot of the issues for the time that he was given to speak. But they do that all the time. It was really like he was trying to BS his way into making some of the COVID stuff related actually to a national digital currency. He was really concerned about the privatized currencies like Libra because they don't want people to have too much control. They want all the control. Obviously, they're the government. This is what they feel they have a responsibility to do. They want to protect their position as, the top global currency. So they don't want people to mess with that. So it makes complete sense why they would say that. But one of the things that I think people need to take from this is that this does not just mean things like Facebook are going to be in control of Libra, and that's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about any company becoming big tech and managing currency. So just imagine if the people from Paxos were to manage the national digital currency. Well, it wouldn't be a national digital currency in that case. Could you imagine if the stable coin was more popular than the actual digital dollar? If it was privatized, they would have to be regulated. But imagine if they didn't like the regulations, they could just move out of the United States. They could still peg their value to the dollar and get around whatever regulations they had. So it's an interesting topic, and I kind of agree with them to a degree, but not really. All right, just gonna publish this stuff. All right, and the Democrats who were in the hearing made a very good point that, well, as part of their talking points on the subject, actually on the subject this time, was that they wanted to make sure that this covered the unbanked and the underbanked and went to mitigate some of the issues with the fintech where people were taking advantage and using like predatory loans and things like that. And yes, I keep getting distracted. There's a lot going on here. And they did mention an act or a bill that they wanted to get passed, which would pretty much make the digital dollar a public good. And in that case, you could like go to the post office and get a bank account, a national bank account, or you could go to the post office and make a transaction or something like that. So that was an interesting topic. And then they brought on some of their guests, or I don't know why I can't think of the name of it right now, but the people who they bring in to testify. Yeah, the people they brought in to testify for the meeting. One of them was the former CFTC chairman, Chris Carlo. Let's see, he's probably here. Yeah, that's the dude. He talked 3 observations that he had about the situation, that the current financial infrastructure is becoming obsolete. He talked a lot about like the 80s and the 90s, how they were kind of like the pillar of success. You could see like they were leading innovation and technology, whereas now they're not. He said also that this new era of things should be stored, managed, and transferred digitally, which it makes complete sense. The whole point of the meeting, and that they want to harness the wave of innovation and use it for economic growth for their generations to come. Again, makes complete sense. I mean, you have this new fad, this new wave of technology, something that's kind of different, but at the same time, this is honestly something that they could have done with a centralized technology a long time ago. It's just that things like smartphones and other things weren't available. And honestly, the way they were talking about using the post office as a way to make your own national bank account and even perhaps do transactions through that, it's like, well, why couldn't they have done that throughout the entire history of the post office? So I get their point. They're talking about innovation and stuff. I guess they're really interested in blockchain because other than that, they've had databases and they've had networks and these sorts of things for tens of years now that were capable of doing it, and they just weren't as available, and they're still complaining that they're not available enough. So they're wanting to also look into more infrastructure. One of the key things this dude wanted, though, was to future-proof the dollar, and that's part of the reason they want to digitize it, of course. And similar to the other countries, they want to explore the CBDC with a pilot program, which would mean like certain people, certain industries, certain businesses, basically just a beta group of users would try to use it. And an example of this is actually the Bahamas. They had their own entire island actually do this. My apologies. So they had their own island that actually tested their CBDC. I'm not sure how that went, actually. I haven't really been able to follow up with that recently. Oh, and I did forget to mention these indicators for those of you who haven't watched anything that I've done. This is the fancy the fancy triple moving average indicator. This is one that was featured by TradingView, one of their scripts of the month a while back. This is just a triple moving average indicator, but it has forecasting. It has what I call an inclusion trail, which I don't think I've seen anywhere before, or essentially it just highlights the section of the moving average that is included in the moving average calculation. So this is a 50 period moving average, the green line, so it highlights the line 50 periods back so you can see what candles are actually included in it. There's some other things here such as choosing different resolutions and different types of moving averages and stuff. So for those of you who are watching that update, there's that. And this one, the fancy moving average, is the exact same thing. It's just one line. It's just about the only difference here. I'll go back and update this one as well. Back to this hearing here. Actually, let me check a couple things real quick. We're good. So back to the hearing. Pull up that text. Yeah, that's pretty much all that guy had. Then they brought in CEO of Paxos, Charles Cascarilla. He just talked about stable coins and CBDCs and basically talking about them working together. They're essentially going to be the same thing whenever you do get a CBDC. Oh man, I messed that up. I should have converged on first. Anyway, they were talking about the CBDCs and how they're going to be very similar to stable coins and all the benefits of stable coins and all the benefits of Paxos, really. He made sure to put plenty of emphasis on that. But he talked about financial inclusion, capital, wow, that's 2 times I messed up. Capital mobilization, basically just making it easier to move money and making it cheaper as well. And then, of course, also the transparency and competition within the market using that technology. All right. And then once he got done, there was some chick, Nikita Catino. She's a visiting professor of law at Duke University. I think she was mostly brought on here to talk about the mostly just brought on to talk about the minority issues and how it relates to the CBDCs. Nothing wrong with that, but she didn't bring a whole lot, honestly, to it. And Prelua, to access the indicator, all you have to do is go to add indicator to your chart, and you can search the public library for fancy triple moving averages or fancy moving average, and then there's also a fancy Bollinger Bands example as well. There's also a couple of other indicators, but just look for the ones that have my name in them, and that's how you can add it to your charts. So yeah, back to my notes here. Yeah, she mostly talked about, like I mentioned, the minority issues, but she related that to underbanked and unbanked people. She talked a lot about the predatory stuff through fintech, like payday loans and things like that, and how those might have targeted certain people. So they finally went on to the question and answer section with the first guy, Mr. Crapo. And I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but his name is literally Crapo. They were asking about the other countries. We already talked about that. It was like China and Switzerland and Bahamas as well. And this is where they asked if the China CBDC was a threat, and it was a pretty much unanimous yes, and I can't disagree. The issue mainly, well, they said that it wasn't as big of an issue as it might be played out to be, like in the media or within fintech circles, but really they said that the dollar is very, very strong, and it's built upon a lot of very strong pillars, but that through what China is doing with their CBDC, they're kind of going after the pillars that make the dollar so strong. So yeah, there's Mr. Crapo, Mr. Mike Crapo, and I don't know if he's a senator or I believe he is. I believe he's probably the committee chair because he was the one who opened it up. All right. Can blockchain models adequately or better protect privacy in data in transaction data? So this guy was asking the CEO of Paxos whether or not blockchain can protect privacy and data in transaction data, and he of course said yes, but he was pretty bold about saying that it improves both transparency and privacy. And to an extent, I believe that yes, crypto does improve both transparency and, to a degree, privacy. But in order to use it within regulations and the rules that they actually have, you're actually going to have to do that KYC, and there's going to be a full chain of your transaction history, and people are going to be seeing where you get money. You can actually see people where they have bought from an exchange, moved it off the exchange, moved it back to an exchange, sold it. So it is transparent and private at the same time, but for governments and people with access to the information, to the on-ramps and the off-ramps, it's completely transparent with very little privacy, as long as you have access to addresses and names associated to it. Didn't really help you a whole lot. Mr. Crapo also asked, can blockchains reduce transactional cost? And he asked Mrs. Catino, and I think she really doesn't understand blockchain all that well, but she said, yes, if it's done properly and they are forced to do so. Well, not necessarily. I mean, it'd be hard to argue that Bitcoin doesn't reduce transaction cost. Take, for example, somebody transferring millions, if not billions of dollars worth of wealth with Bitcoin and only paying like $100 or whatever in fees. That to me seems like a very cheap transaction. Now, if you're trying to send $10 and it costs $1, that's pretty expensive. But it's all kind of relative here, and they purposefully make sure not to talk about Bitcoin in a positive light in these hearings. But the regulations, I completely agree. If they do something like this, it will need to be regulated to the extent that they need to limit transaction fees. Why you would need a transaction fee on a national digital currency, I'm not entirely sure, unless you just wanted to tax people for the hell of it. Because you're going to be running the infrastructure, I assume. You would probably be in control of all the network nodes if it's a DLT. So why would you need to collect a transaction fee? That's just my thoughts on that one. Other than to prevent people from flooding the network, but there's other solutions for things like that. Let's see, there was another dude next. Yeah, this guy, Mr. Brown. He did a lot of talk about unbanked and underbanking. Again, this is one of the Democratic talking points. And he talked to Mrs. Catino exclusively, which is why I think she was brought on just to talk about the Democratic talking points. But she said that it addresses frictions with the payment system now. How would this help people who are victimized by these fringe tech? Those are play on words for fintech, the people who do a bad job at fintech. How would it help those people who are pretty much victimized by those types of companies? And she really said that it would just give them more access and more options, no longer having to wait on paper checks and things like that. What was the other one? Yeah, it's much easier to use, and that it can be insured, unlike Venmo. So you could have your national digital currency bank account insured, but your Venmo balance is not. Let's see. And then he also said, and this is something that was kind of annoying, people aren't flocking to Bitcoin and crypto. Why is that so if they are meant for the unbanked and the underbanked? So a lot of people are claiming, Bitcoin is meant specifically for the unbanked and the underbanked, is what he's saying, and that people just aren't using it. Well, I would completely disagree. There's a lot of transactional data that completely disagrees with that statement, that the uses and the actual number of addresses holding Bitcoin and just general uses of it, I believe, are going up. I mean, I accept it for payments myself. There's a lot going on for it that they just kind of ignore. Oh yeah, pull notes again. So in response to that, Mrs. Catino says that there is a cost base is their issue. So she's saying the transaction fees are high. So they're talking about transaction fees again. And once again, that's entirely relative. So we were talking earlier about a super high transaction fee for a $10 payment would be a absolutely completely irrelevant transaction fee for a multi-million-dollar or even $1 billion transaction. So it's relative, but I kind of agree to the point that it is a high transaction cost for the type of people who they are talking about, the unbanked and the underbanked, because those are probably the type of people who don't have a lot of money, so high transaction costs really impact them a lot. But at the same time, if you look at Bitcoin as a store of value and you want to hold it long term, then you're not going to be transacting it a lot. So it depends on your use case and how you're actually using the network if you consider the transaction fee to be high. They also say that you can't use it in a lot of places. Now, I completely disagree with that. You can use Bitcoin and Ethereum wherever you want. It's just that people aren't accepting it yet. It's just not adopted. So when they say that they can't use it, it just means that they haven't used it. So I think there's a little bit of difference in the wording on how they actually mean that as opposed to how they actually said it. And their one really true good point was that the price of those are completely unstable. Like, the value goes up and down considerable amounts over a short amount of time. Excuse me. So in that way, yeah, they're right on that one. I don't have any issue saying that, but hopefully over time that isn't an issue when it comes to crypto. Now, after that, we finally got to move on to Mr. Rounds. This dude, he was asking who are the winners and losers of fintech going to be if they move to CBDC, and he asked all of the people who were testifying, and really they pretty much all just said it depends, and that is probably the safest answer you could have given, but it's the probably most correct answer as well, because it's impossible to say who is going to benefit the most from something like that when you have to have a crystal ball to tell you for sure. But essentially anyone who tries to embrace it and those who don't embrace it are going to lose out. And then that kind of leads to the next guy, Mr. Tester. Yeah, this guy, he didn't get on there very long, but he was really worried about people in rural areas with bad internet connections, like where he lives. He mentioned he's a little rude. I thought he cut one of the dudes off, but he had a good point that it's hard to get a good connection in rural areas. So what good does a CBDC do for these people? And aren't you essentially just ignoring these people? It's like, well, yeah, they're gonna be left out if you don't improve their network access out there. So if you want these people to move forward, you need to push for funding to get better access where they are. And I've talked about on my channel a lot, Starlink, which is, I believe they said is going to be available by the end of the year or early next year, will be a huge boost to rural areas, although there's no price details on it yet. If you're willing to pay for it, you could have it. And honestly, they'll make a big deal about it still not being enough because of that. And honestly, you could use satellite internet now. It's got a high latency, but at the same time, I don't think that really matters if all you need is a connection to do a transaction. All right, so we got 2 of them done, pretty much all the way through all the notes that I have. Yeah, this was the last guy I was able to watch. Well, I actually watched some of Tom Cotton, who was on after that. One of the good questions this guy actually had was what would happen if there was any sort of fraud, like somebody stole your credit card or they stole your CBDC private key and were starting to spend your money. So the CEO of Paxos says that the way they handle it is that they are regulated by banks, so they have to kind of uphold the same rules as an actual bank. And he said that it's actually more than that because they're a trust. So essentially, if there was fraud, the people would be refunded. But I think with a CBDC, if you can prove fraud, then you can also recover the funds because it's all digital. I mean, you could permanently, instantly recover funds. You wouldn't have to worry about that person using those funds to buy on credit anything else, and then having those funds removed and the person not return anything they bought on credit. So I think it's a little bit better in that aspect. And let's see. They talked about making a national law for regulation because Mr. Tester believed that it might have only applied to New York since they were regulated in New York, but it also applies to all the states, is what Cascaria said. See, Tom Cotton. This is the last guy that I was able to sit for. His opening statement was pretty good. He said the dollar must be better than Bitcoin, better than a digital yuan, and better than whatever else. He said the dollar might fall behind and end up like an old flip phone or like Blockbuster, which are outdated models that are no longer used. And I couldn't agree more. If you're wanting to remain the world reserve currency, then you need to basically prove it that you deserve it. All right. Let's see, what was his question? He was wanting to know how the stimulus for COVID would have looked like if we had a CBDC. Mr. Juan Carlo, former CFTC chair, said it would pretty much be instant with smartphones. And one thing I noticed, they talked a lot about smartphones and mobile technology, getting access to banks and stuff, but like there was no talk about desktops or servers or like any sort of talk about programmable money like Ethereum smart contracts. They mentioned it briefly, but I don't think they mentioned how that would actually be. And there is Mr. Juan Carlo, he works with an organization for the Digital Dollar Project, I think is what it's called. So maybe that's worth looking into for me to see some of their details on how they would want to do that. But if the CBDC isn't programmable and it's just some sort of mobile app, I think it'd be kind of dumb. Like, I don't know. I think it'd be kind of dumb not to have programmable money as part of the package if they want to be the best. And then, of course, it got really repetitive. They were talking about some of the same things. But, yeah, that was it. I've kind of already mentioned the key takeaway, but both sides, Republican and Democrat, seem to be on board with the CBDC. And although some of them were reluctant, I think they all kind of agree it's going to be necessary. So I've been following CBDCs for a while on my channel and even before I started the channel back up, and these are coming. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And for the United States, my personal guess is it will be fully implemented within the next decade. I believe we'll probably have a prototype within 5 years. I believe it's going to take a lot longer than some of these politicians think it will. I don't think they realize how far behind these other countries we are, and yet they're talking about being innovators and leaders, and it's kind of a joke. I mean, I don't know if they're trying to do propaganda or if they really believe this stuff, but we're not even close. I know there are people in the government looking into it already. That's pretty obvious. But at the same time, to not have any public model out there, no public data about your own CBDC, that does not look like a leader to me. And I wish that stuff wasn't up on the screen. Oh well. Sorry about that to whoever sent me the private message. That's actually one of the things I've suggested to the TradingView team is to provide a streamer mode for those people who are working on TradingView for their streams, because there's a lot of private data that people share with you on TradingView. If you're someone like myself who does code for other people, or you're working with a private indicator with private settings, or for example, somebody had sent me a private message, and that would have been nice not to have popped up on the screen during the stream. So I'll continue to give them some feedback on that, but I think that's going to be it for the stream today. I hope those of you who stuck around enjoyed it. This one was a lot of talk, just a lot of talk, honestly. I didn't do a whole lot of work on indicators or anything. Hopefully you were around early to listen to the stuff about the crypto.com coin, how that syndication was today, and how there's a decent chance that coin's going to get sold off very soon, because people are going to have used it for its purposes and they're not going to need it for a little while. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully we can do some more code type stuff tomorrow, but I was really excited, honestly, about the digital currency hearing. That's a big one for me because, like I said, I've been following it for a really long time. But that'll be it for now. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and you will all have a great day. Thanks.